Hello, everyone. I'm here now with my friend Mahiya, and she's speaking to us from Ananda's community in Assisi, Italy. And so she's going to tell us a little bit about how she came to live at Ananda, to be Master's disciple. Good morning, Mahiya. How nice to see you.
Good morning. Thank you.
So if you could just tell us what was your upbringing like? Where were you before you came to Ananda? Who were you before you found Master?
Yeah. I actually came to Ananda at quite a young age, so my upbringing isn't very long, that part of the story. I grew up in England. I'm English, in a very nice setting, a very normal, stable family. The interesting thing is my mum is still a very devout Christian. My father is an atheist. My mother is a very devout Christian. So it was very interesting. We're three girls, three sisters. And my mother always tried to take us along to church. I was the rebellious one who every Sunday she managed to get my other two sisters in the car, and I would stand on the doorstep and I would refuse to go. And I just didn't want to be forced to go. And then something happened, and at a certain point I said, okay, I'll go. And I went along and I discovered a wonderful world in this. She had like Christianity, which was it's like a family church. So they're very much like a community, very much like we are here at Ananda. They're very close-knit, they're very informal. And there I found a family. So I started to go along to this family church and made friends with all the teenagers and had a really good social life. We did Bible camps and camping and adventures and things together.
I want to ask, were you drawn to it? Were you drawn to it for the community, or were you drawn to it for the teaching, for Christ? Was it about Jesus, or was it about your friends there?
It was about my friends. But at the same time, I never understood that there was an inner relationship that one could have with Jesus or God. I had feelings that were stirred up inside of me, but now I understand it was more emotional feelings. So I was very moved. There were moments where I felt very moved and stirred. They had wonderful music, and so in a way it awakened something in me, but the inner connection was never made with me and Jesus or me and God. So I have to say it was much more a nice place to be, very social. It gave me a nice feeling. And as you'll learn as this conversation probably goes on, I'm very, very community orientated. So I think it did awaken in me something to do with that, being together, being a family.
Okay, so this was your teenage years, you started to say. You had friends
who were
teenage,
so I'm about 14, 15, 16. Until it got to a point where it wasn't socially accepted by my friendship group, in school to be a Christian. So I soon decided that I didn't want to be labeled as a Christian because it wasn't cool. So I go away from that, and I just closed the door. That was it. So it was a very nice chapter, but it didn't awaken much inwardly within me. But for me, I defined it as I've had my experience of Christianity, of religion, of God. I haven't really found anything, so I'm done with that, and now I'm an atheist. And I actually define myself as an atheist, even though it's a bit of a superficial way to define yourself as an atheist. But I didn't believe in God. And interestingly enough, I was always a truth seeker. Which is, and I didn't know that, but I would speak to my sister. I remember conversations saying, I know that there's more to life than just what we see. There's more to human beings than just what appears to be. I think we have amazing powers that we can develop. I think that we're not using our powers to their full extent. And if we believed that we could do anything, then we could do it, but we don't believe it. So I think we're limiting ourselves by our mind. So this was one of the conversations I remember having with my sister, and she was, laughing at me, so if we believe that we can fly, can we fly? And I said, well, I'm sure if we really believed it, then we could.
Mahiya, I want to ask
you. But
it
was still.
Where did that idea come from? Did it just come from inside your heart?
Yeah.
It just seemed self-evident to you at the time?
Yeah. That there was much more to, I mean, that's what I mean by a truth seeker, just always this feeling that there was much more to life than was apparent, that there was much more potential, that it couldn't just be like it was.
Okay. So
that feeling, but at the same time, I have to say, I never really explored that any further. It's not like I tried to develop my mind powers. So it was still very much just on the level of feeling or theory.
I understand.
Then, and the story goes on, I would go to university. I studied cultural studies. So again, it was, and I loved it. It was very much about community, about different cultures, how they interact, how they, the traditions that they have, the relationship that they have them with the West who comes in. And it was very much people orientated, culture orientated, and community orientated. And I loved it. But what I discovered at university, which was the most important thing, was yoga. So I discovered, I did an extra, a yoga class, not as part of my curriculum, but as an after-study class.
But
I became passionate.
How did you happen to come upon that? Did somebody offer it to you?
Yeah, it was offered at the university. So you can do, So I just started to go and I just liked it, but it was very physical. But I was very much into fitness. I would go to the gym every day. I was into, health and fitness, and yoga was healthy, and I liked bending my body. I was always very flexible, so I really enjoyed, that aspect of it. And I did that for about all 3 years during university, and I became passionate. And at the end of my degree, I thought, gosh, there's nothing really that inspires me as much as yoga. And all of my friends were talking about the careers they wanted to have. And I thought, I just want to become a yoga teacher. So I was planning on going and studying yoga and then becoming a yoga teacher. So that was what university gave me, is yoga. And then there was, like about a year after I finished university, it was Christmas, and I had heard during my yoga class, like chakras or energy. The teacher didn't really teach it on that level, but you hear these words. Right. And so I asked my family for books. I said, if you want to give me something for Christmas, then you can give me some books on yoga, because I wanted to kind of find out if there was something more behind it. And so I got 4 books for Christmas, and I opened them up one at a time. And the first one talked about something like universal mind or something like this. So this was already quite a bigger concept than I'd ever really thought about. And then the next one said something similar, and it just got bigger and bigger. And the third book I opened, it talked about God, and that was a problem for me. And I closed the book and I put it aside. I'm like, what's God got to do with yoga? This is no. And I put it aside and I opened up the 4th book, and on the very first page, it said God. And at that point, because it was the 4th book, and the idea just kept on building and building until it got really direct. God, because I had such a strong feeling of truth seeking and wanting to know what was behind, what was really happening. I said, okay, Mahiya, or Zoe, I was Zoe at the time, you've opened the door. There's no way that you can close that door and go back. You have to go through. And from then on, there was no turning back. That was it. That was my goal in life. I want to know, what is this God, and what's the connection between yoga, my life, and God. And then it was very, very fast. That was in January of the year 2000. By November, I was living in the community in Ananda Assisi. So it was.
How did you find out about it? Did you start searching for a yoga community, or where did it come to you?
I started looking for a meditation group. So I found a group that was near. I was living in Leeds in North England, which was it's not my hometown, but that's where I was at university, and I'd stayed on living there. And I looked for a meditation group, and I found a group called the Brahma Kumaras. I don't know if they're well known. And they helped me at first. They helped me to open up to the idea that we're not the body, but we're the soul. So that was nobody ever introduced me to that idea before. Or even if Christianity did, I didn't get it. So this was very helpful. They helped me to understand that we can control our thoughts, that we can choose our thoughts, we can reduce stress by thinking positive thoughts. So it was a very good start. But then, so one day my friend comes, I was living with a group of friends, and my friend comes into the house, into my bedroom, and says, "Hey Zoe, I've got this book from the library. I don't understand a word of it, but I think you'll like it." And he gave it to me, and it was Super Consciousness, A Guide to Meditation by J. Donald Walters, Swami Kriya Nanda.
By Swami Kriya Nanda.
So this was the book.
So you weren't you weren't introduced by Autobiography of a Yogi like some people, but it was an English language book by Swami Kriya Nanda, even one that he published incognito a bit, more as under his American.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I read that book and I didn't understand a word. But I read it and I said, this man has all the answers and I have to, that's it. It's him. He knows all the answers and I have to know him. And that's it. That I didn't understand it, but I knew it was. I knew I had to meet him, and he would help me. So at the very last page, it says it doesn't talk about Ananda anywhere in that book, and it's written in J. Donald Walters. But on the very last page, it says if you want to know more, I recommend that you visit or contact the Expanding Light. That's it. It didn't explain what it was, so I went on the internet. I wrote in the Expanding Light. And up on the internet, on the screen, there came the image of Yogananda and of Swamiji. And that was it. I knew. I just knew that was the answer.
You recognized Yogananda, or you resonated with his picture and with Swami's picture? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah. So by now, the whole question of God is no problem. And
it's still a problem. It's definitely still a problem. It took me even now, the word God has some connotations for me.
I see.
So I'm still working on it. It's still got very Christian connotations. So I do better with Divine Mother rather than God. But,
That's all right. God is not a very accurate word. It just means what it means. So now you know Swami Kriya Nanda. Expanding Light is in America. So somewhere you must have found out there was something in Europe, or did you come all the way to America first, or did you go?
No, I went to America. So that very day that I found the internet site, the Expanding Light, I wrote to them and said, this was in April, and I wrote to them and said, can I come? So they wrote back and said, yes, I could come. So I was so excited. And I went to this, I remember that as soon as I got the reply, I went to the meditation that morning at the Brahma Kumara Center. And I said, and at the end, I was so excited to tell them that I found this place and I was going to, to study yoga and explore my path. And they afterwards, they said, we need to talk to you. And they pulled me over into a corner and very seriously, they said, we know Yogananda, we know his teachings, but, he believes that God is in everyone. And if God is in everyone, that means he's also in murderers. And how can that be so? So they were very concerned about me, and they filled my mind with doubt. And I went in, that was a meditation around 7 a.m. before, and then I would catch the bus and go into work in the city, and I had a job there. And I went into work that day, and my boss, who was he was kind of like a friend, and he saw that there was something wrong, and he said, let's talk, So he pulled me into his office, and I just burst into tears, and I was so confused because I was so happy about finding Ananda, and then they basically said, that path is not valid, and so what you found isn't valid, and the only path that's valid is the Brahma Kumara's path, basically. Which I didn't really feel, but they were telling me that was the truth, and I was looking for the truth, so I was very confused. And he said, okay, he listened to me, and I cried, and he said, go home, take 3 days off, go home, and just, just take some time, it's okay. So they actually sent me home. I got the bus home, and I got to my doorstep, and there was a box on my doorstep. And in that box, because I had actually ordered it immediately, was the autobiography and the path. That very morning arrived. And my boss had given me 3 days just to sort myself out and how I felt. And I spent 3 days reading the autobiography and the path. And then I was just like, Brahma Kumaris, forget it. You know, I'm never going back. I know Ananda is, I had no doubts. It was Ananda. So I was totally convinced. And I went to Ananda village in June of the year 2000. I stayed until September. So it was a full 3 months, as much as my visa allowed, and did the Karma Yoga program. And it was wonderful. It was just
Did you become a
amazing.
disciple? Did you take Kriya during those 3 months or no?
No. My relationship with Master was it was gradual, but it was also quick at the same time. I recognized when I read his book and his teachings, I knew that I had no doubt that everything he said was the truth. So that was immediately, I didn't doubt anything. He knows and it's the truth. But did I want to accept him as my guru? Because what if somebody else better or came along? And I think that's something that many people go through. You know, if I commitment's a big thing, you know. So am I really sure that that's, you know, my guru? So it was a mixture.
Did you meet Swami Kriya Nanda in California, or did you meet him in Europe?
In Europe when I came in November.
So you went, so then you came back to Europe and then found out about our group in Italy, obviously.
Yeah.
And then
so
Swami Kriya Nanda was there in Italy, and that was your first in-person meeting with him then.
That was my first in-person meeting. And it's interesting how I came to Ananda in Italy, because after my experience in Ananda village, I was totally convinced that I was staying on, that this was my path. I was almost convinced that Master was my guru. And but I was not convinced about communities, about moving to another village or some other community. I didn't even think that there was a community in Italy, or even think of going and visiting or joining. I thought I'd get a job I'd live in London, I'd get a job, I'd find a meditation group, and I'd live a normal life, because I'm Aries, my sun sign is Aries. So I'm very, very independent. And I actually thought that communities was for people who needed a little bit more help. Now I realize that's me, so.
You were right. You just didn't know that it was also.
I was right. I was really right. So I looked for a meditation group in London, and I went to the SRF group, and it was just totally cold and not my thing. And then I found another devotee in London, and it was just him and his wife, and so there wasn't much going on there. And I contacted another devotee in Devon, but he said, oh, we have once a month we have a kirtan. So I couldn't find that support group I needed. So after 5 days, I'd realized that there was something not right with my plan, because all the doors were closing. And so at that point, I have prayed like I never have prayed probably again in my life. My soul was desperate, because this call for truth was so awakened and so strong, and I knew that's all that I wanted. But at the same time, my path wasn't clear what I had to do. So I prayed to Master like this. I said, I'm new. I can't feel you. I can't see you. I don't have visions. I don't, I need a physical sign. I need something really concrete and physical and visible. I need you to tell me where I'm supposed to go and what I'm supposed to do. And I need it to be something that isn't visions and whatever, but I need it to be concrete, so I know that, so I can understand it. And I prayed like that in the morning with all the fervor of my soul, with tears and great intensity. And the next morning, I was staying at my friend's house, and he comes into the room and he said, look I've got a postcard from my parents, and do you want to see it? And I said, yeah. And so he showed me the postcard, and as it was like when you go in a film and everything goes in slow motion, because there's a really big important moment coming up. So it was like that. And when my eyes actually fixed on the postcard, there was a picture of a Sisi, stayed in Assisi. His parents were in Assisi, and in that moment, it was just there was absolutely no doubt. It was like my soul and the answer. It was as if my ego had just stepped aside, and it was like, I know where I'm supposed to go and what I'm supposed to do, and that was it. That was it. From that moment, I knew I'm supposed to live in and under Assisi. I'd never been there. I wasn't interested in living there, 5 minutes before, but in that moment, there was absolutely no doubt. And I told my family, I'm going, and my friends, I'm moving to Nanda Assisi. I contacted them. Basically, it took me 6 weeks, but I saved up a bit of money. I packed my suitcases and I moved. I knew that I wasn't going back. So.
Did you speak Italian?
Actually, that's an interesting, I did.
Oh, you already did?
Amazingly. Because in England, up until my school year, French was always the language that you studied in school. But in my school, which was it was quite a good school, they decided to open up the languages in my year when I started school. So you were either put in French, Spanish, or Italian. And I was put in Italian. And so I studied in school for 5 years Italian. And then when I went to college, which is, the school system's different, but that's like from 16 to 18, you study 3 or 4 subjects, and one of them that I chose was Italian. So I studied it through, advanced level as well. So when I came to Italy, I knew the grammar and I knew the vocabulary, and I could have basic conversations, and must have gave me a good head start.
Now I want to skip ahead. So tell me about your first meeting with Swami Kriya Nanda.
Yeah. So I had just arrived at Nanda Assisi, and he was living here. So he used to drop by the dining room on his way to town and just say hi to everyone. So it was one of those days I was in the dining room kitchen area, and Swamiji was coming. So he went around saying hi to everyone, and he got to me, and he didn't know me, so he asked, oh, hello, who are you? And so I told him my name, and he said, where are you from, and where do you live? And you say stupid things when you're nervous, and so I said something really, stupid, just trying to think of something to say. I said, oh, actually, I don't really have a home, I don't live there, and I don't live here. And then I said, I'm just a lost soul. I'm just a lost soul, like that. And he looked at me, and he said, no, you're not. You're not a lost soul.
God.
Yeah. And that was my welcome home.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful. Amazing how we think we're on our own, but we're not on our own at all, are we? Not at all. Okay. So now, I know subsequently, because we only just have a few more minutes here. So tell me, so now that was 20 years ago, 15 years ago?
Yeah. And it was almost 20 years ago.
And you've been a constant resident of the community since. And and I understand that you're married now. You met your husband there?
Yeah, Arudra, he's Croatian, and he first came to Nanda in 2009, so I've been living here for 9 years already. And when he came along, it was an instant soul recognition. It didn't take us long to work out that we were supposed to be together and get married, and he's been a light in my life. So you're a small United Nations. Croatia is living in Italy. You're living in your own family, master's ideal of the world coming together in one place. Yeah. This community I think last time we counted, there's about 16 nationalities living here. So it's one of the unique aspects of, it's not an Italian community, it's a European community. So we represent all of the European nationalities, and it's one of the biggest blessings and one of the biggest challenges. because we know, we're all so different anyway as individuals with our own personalities and such. But when you add different cultures, the Germans are very, very different than the Italians, who are very different than the Americans, who are very different from the English, and then we have Russian and Spanish and Swiss, and you put it all together and it's
interesting. It's very interesting. Mahiya, after all these years of living as a disciple, your work in the community has been, why don't we give us just a little bit about what have you ended up doing while you've been in the community there? What have you done?
Well, I did. I've done basically everything. The main service that I had for 15 years was in the kitchen. So I developed a passion for not just cooking, but for health and diet. So I studied all of Master's teachings on yogic diet, and then I wrote a book, and then I wrote another book. So it wasn't just to do with I like cooking, it's to do with how can I use diet to help my consciousness, and that became a big passion for me. And then I was in charge of the kitchen, and I did cooking courses and seminars and things, so all around the yogic diet and Master's teachings. That Dharma finished in 2016, and then I was pulled. Since then, I've been basically pulled into community. So now I'm part of the community team, which is responsible for just about every aspect of community life. At the moment, there's a lot of development, expansion, and transition happening. So it's a huge moment. But membership and working with people and supporting people on all levels. So it's a wonderful dharma to have. It's what can I say? We've got to.
I understand. Have you ever had any moments of doubt or regret about the decisions that you made, packing your suitcases and leaving England?
No. Because as I said, in that moment when I saw that postcard, that was my soul that was saying that. I had soul knowing 100%. There was never any doubt. But I've never doubted that this is where I'm supposed to be ever. It's very, very strong, very clear. But it's not always been easy.
Yeah.
I actually have Saturn in my house of communities, which means that there's a lot of challenges there as well. And sometimes I just wanted to pack my bags and leave, but I knew that I never would, and that I would stay. But it's not. Community life isn't just the rosy picture that some people can have. There's a lot of growth. You have to be prepared to work on yourself every day, and it's intense. You see yourself for who you are, because you're surrounded by mirrors. Even in our community, it's very intense as well, because we're so much in contact with each other. We interact very much. We eat together, we serve together, we live together, we do everything together. I mean, we have a very unique system here, which I'm sure you and a lot of people know because you visited. So it's intense. You're always with people, and there's a lot of guest flow as well here. So you're not only always with community members, you're also always with, up to 100, 150 guests. So, it's not easy being with people all the time. So a part of me sometimes wants to just withdraw, but I think over the years that I've learned how to work with that more.
So how do you see going forward? What is Ananda to you going forward, and yourself on this path? How do you see it?
For me personally, or Ananda in general? Ananda, both.
Or either.
Both or either. I think for me, the only important thing is, again, my search for truth. So I see Ananda as my pathway to truth, and Master is my constant companion and guide in that. So for that, I'm eternally grateful. And Swami always said, I'm not interested in communities for community's sake, only that they help people to find God. So I have to say it's the same. I mean, I have definitely a very strong part in me that also loves the community for the community's sake. I do. I believe in them as a way of life. an alternative way of life, which is a solution for many of the broken models that we have in, you know, broken social models, economic models, environmental models, all of these things. I mean, simple living together in a sustainable way where we live in friendship and cooperation, I would recommend it as a way of life. So I do believe also in, that's very strong in me, but essentially, as Swami said, why are we all here? We're here to work on ourselves, and there's a lot of work that happens. There's a lot still to do, but work in progress, let's say.
Okay, that's what Ananda is then. All right, my sister, that was extremely helpful. I'm very glad to hear it. So it builds everyone's faith, I think, to realize how specifically and personally God is taking care of each one of us. Thank you very much for sharing that story. It was just wonderful to hear.
Thank you, Asha.
God bless you, my dear.
God bless you.